You were never actually disconnected. You were just never taught how to listen. From the very beginning, your senses were hijacked, not by force, but by culture. From the moment you opened your eyes, you were trained to trust only what you could touch, measure, or see. Everything else, the invisible, the energetic, the intuitive, was pushed to the sidelines, labeled as make-believe or irrational. You were taught to chase answers out there, to trust degrees, experts, algorithms, and authority figures. But the real source of clarity that's always been inside of you, quiet, waiting, ignored. There's a signal, older than language, older than time. It doesn't shout, it hums, and it speaks directly to your soul. It's called the Akashic Records, a field of consciousness that holds every thought, emotion, and intention that's ever existed, across every version of you. This isn't mythology. This isn't religion. It's deeper than both. It's a knowing so ancient that the systems trying to erase it don't even realize they're built on top of it. And here's the thing. No one tells you you don't need decades of silence in a cave to access it. You don't need robes or rituals or perfect posture. You just need a few minutes, the right frequency, the right state of awareness, and something inside you begins to stir. See, before you even had words, your perception was already being molded. You were born with this intuitive, unfiltered connection to something greater, a built-in guidance system. But the programming started early. You were told what to think, what to believe, what to ignore. Imagination was dismissed as childish. Inner knowing was labeled as superstition. Anything that didn't fit the script, anything invisible, was discarded. They didn't destroy the ancient wisdom. They buried it under layers of schooling, dogma, distractions, deadlines. You sat in classrooms memorizing facts you'd never use. Got praised for repeating the right answers. Got punished for asking the wrong questions. Slowly, your natural instincts were numbed. Your inner voice drowned out. And without realizing it, you were trained to look outward for the answers you already carried within. That's the cost. You forgot how to listen. Not with your ears, but with your being. No one told you there's a frequency running beneath the noise, a current humming under the surface of everything, a consciousness field that isn't accessed through belief but through resonance. That's the Akashic Records. Not a fantasy, not a metaphor, but an energetic architecture woven into the fabric of reality itself, whispered about by mystics, researched by quantum physicists, and felt unmistakably by anyone who's ever had that sudden gut-level knowing that couldn't be explained. But here's the big question. Why haven't you heard about it? Because someone who's truly connected is powerful. And someone who's powerful doesn't blindly follow. They don't depend on systems designed to keep them small. They don't collapse in fear when things get uncertain because they've seen beyond the veil. So instead of helping you reconnect with that inner power, the world gave you substitutes, influencers, experts, smart algorithms, endless stimulation, all of it designed to keep you tuned out of the one signal that can't be bought, branded, or manipulated your own. Some truths are too ancient, too disruptive to be fully revealed here. That's why we created the Free Insights Academy newsletter. You can find the link below. When you sign up, you'll also get access to a free digital copy of the Kabbalion. Because once you understand what the Akashic Records are, you'll realize you've never been alone. You've been guided, nudged, protected, warned. But no one ever showed you how to recognize the signal, so you called it coincidence, or anxiety, or random luck. But it wasn't random. That subtle feeling you couldn't explain, that inner whisper when something felt off, that was contact. Brief, quiet, powerful. The Akashic field isn't a destination. It's not a mountaintop or a secret dimension. It's a vibration you attune to, a frequency you already carry. And every time you slow down, even for a moment, and soften your thoughts, you inch closer to hearing it. It starts with whispers, glimpses of who you were before the noise, the deeper blueprint of your soul, the memory of everything that's ever been and everything still possible. But that's exactly why you were trained to forget. Because once you remember, the control fades. That's the real fear, not that you'll rebel, but that you'll remember. Because a soul that remembers its origin doesn't play by rules meant to cage it. It listens differently, lives differently. It becomes ungovernable. See, most people believe reality ends at what can be touched. Concrete, measurable, solid. But what if that's not the truth? What if reality is coded, not like a video game, but like an intelligent, responsive matrix? Not random, not linear, something alive. What if every thought, emotion, or choice you've ever had left an imprint in the fabric of existence stored not in space but in vibration? That's the Akashic field. Some call it the collective unconscious. Some call it the book of life. But it's none of those things. And it's all of them. Because it's not an idea. It's a structure. A living memory bank of consciousness itself. And whether you realize it or not, you've already touched it. That déjà vu. That dream that came true, that inexplicable pull towards someone or something that wasn't fantasy. That was the signal. A momentary alignment with the field where time folds in on itself and clarity pierces through the fog. You don't access it by running toward it. You access it by slowing down, by matching its resonance. For thousands of years, mystics and sages have connected to it. They called it divine insight or soul memory, but now science is starting to catch up. We hear whispers of it in quantum entanglement, zero-point energy holographic theory. These aren't just trendy ideas. They're glimpses of something deeper, a bridge between ancient knowing and modern discovery. Because here's the breakthrough. Consciousness doesn't start in the brain. It extends beyond it. It's a web, a field, a stream of encoded information holding everything: your past lives, your dreams, your patterns, your path. Imagine the internet, but not accessed through devices, accessed through presence. Each soul has its own frequency, its own data stream. And unlike human systems, this one can't be corrupted. It's raw, precise, pure. And when you connect to it, you don't just see, you remember. You remember who you were before you were told who to be. You remember the soul contracts you made, the lessons you came to learn, the futures you have the power to shift. And the best part, you don't need permission. You were born with the key. Your intention is the tuning fork. Your stillness is the gateway. Your silence is the password. The Akashic Records aren't up in the clouds. They're not in temples or behind gates. They're right here, pulsing through the reality you live in, made of the same essence you are. You don't access them like a file. You remember them because they've always been a part of you. The only question now is, are you ready to listen? There's this soft lie that gets passed around spiritual circles like secondhand smoke. It's subtle, but it sticks, that awakening takes time, that you need years of silence, lifetimes of karma, or some rare bloodline to access higher awareness, that only monks, gurus, or psychics can touch the sacred. But let's be honest, that's just another costume the programming wears. Another story to keep you waiting. Obedient, small. The Akashic Records don't care about your titles. They don't need your rituals. They don't require your suffering. They only respond to one thing: resonance. And resonance doesn't take years. It takes presence. Just a moment of real presence. A choice. A shift. A breath where you stop tuning into the chaos and start tuning into the current. This is why sound changes everything. Not just music frequency, vibration, tone. Frequencies are not abstract ideas. They're the architecture of experience. The right vibration doesn't just calm your mind, it bypasses the logic. It skips the trauma. It goes straight past the ego. It drops you into the space between thoughts. And that's where truth lives. That's where the records begin to speak. That's why certain tones, chants, or even binaural beats, they don't just relax you. They recalibrate you. They're not spiritual fluff. They're math, physics. They reattune your field to match the space where the Akashic signal lives. When your nervous system relaxes, when your breath deepens, when your brain stops trying to name and label everything, you don't go anywhere. You open. And when you open, images appear. Words drop in. Emotions release. You feel memories that aren't from this lifetime. Or maybe they are. You see pieces of your path with such unexpected clarity, it almost makes you laugh. Like, how did I not see this before? This isn't imagination. This is perception expanded beyond the limits you were taught to stay inside. See, the Akashic Records aren't some far-off destination you need to earn your way into. They're more like a frequency always broadcasting. But your inner radio's been jammed by fear, noise, self-doubt, distraction. The truth is, most people don't need more effort. They need less resistance. It doesn't take a pilgrimage. It doesn't require fasting or chanting on a mountain. Sometimes it just takes 10 minutes of listening. It can hit you mid-walk, in the middle of a song, while staring at the ceiling in silence. And when it does, it's not loud. It's not theatrical. It's obvious, familiar, like something you've always known but somehow forgot. That's the difference between accessing truth and consuming content. One lands, the other passes. You've probably felt it before, those flashes of clarity that didn't come from thinking harder, but from feeling deeper. That's the records. That's the field breaking through the fog. The more you stop chasing and start listening, the more it happens. The more the illusion thins. The shift isn't external. You don't become enlightened by traveling the world or adopting someone else's truth. You shift by returning to what you already are under all the layers. The records don't give you power. They remind you that you never lost it. And when you align with them, life doesn't suddenly become easy. It becomes honest, real, unfiltered. That's what the ego fears most: clarity. Because once you hear the truth, you can't unhear it. You can't keep pretending to be someone you're not. You can't keep walking a path that was never yours to begin with. This is why people often cry the first time they truly touch the field. Not because it's scary or dramatic, but because it's so deeply familiar, so tender, so real. A part of you whispers, "Oh, it's me. It's always been me." And after that, you can't go back. Not to who you were, not to how you used to move through life. Because now you know. Now you remember. Everything you were taught told you to trust your senses. Only what can be seen, touched, measured. Reality had to be quantifiable, logical, peer-reviewed. You were praised for being analytical, rewarded for being rational, conditioned to see the unseen as foolish, childish, or just plain wrong. Intuition became a dirty word. Feeling was dismissed as weakness. Inner knowing was treated like guesswork. But the truth, the deepest parts of who you are, your origin, your purpose, your patterns, they don't live in logic. Logic is a useful tool. It helps you fix things, build things, navigate the day-to-day. But it's not the language of the soul. It's not the language of memory, or emotion, or energetic vision. The Akashic field doesn't speak in data points or pie charts. It speaks in images, metaphors, feelings, and those strange moments where you just know, and you can't explain why. It speaks in the way your soul has always known how to listen. But your programming made you forget how. You've been conditioned to shut this down, to dismiss your dreams, to ignore the nudges, to call your instincts irrational. But be honest, how many times have you had a gut feeling and it turned out to be right? How many times have you felt an instant, unexplainable connection with someone? How many times has truth hit you so hard in the chest that your brain couldn't keep up? That's not coincidence, that's contact. Accessing the Akashic Records isn't about hearing some booming voice or seeing flashing lights. Most of the time it's quiet. It's subtle. A feeling that rises. An image that floats in. A sentence that appears in your mind so clear, so certain you don't even doubt it. These aren't random thoughts. They're whispers from the field. Reminders that you're more than your job, more than your trauma, more than your goals. This is where truth actually lives, in the places logic was never built to reach. In the space between thoughts. In the sensations that come before language tries to explain them away. And that's why most people miss it. They're too busy trying to figure it out. But the records were never something to figure out. They're something you feel through. The moment you stop asking, "Is this real?" and start asking, "Why does this feel true?" everything shifts. You stop chasing proof. You start trusting resonance. And resonance, it never lies. It doesn't need logic to back it up. It just lands. Deep. Like a chord inside your chest that's finally struck. Stillness becomes dangerous to the system because in stillness, you start hearing things you were never meant to hear. You hear memory. You hear clarity. You hear your own soul speaking through the static. And when that happens, the illusion cracks. You begin to realize that all the limits you accepted, they weren't natural. They were installed. Every time you ignored a dream, dismissed a knowing, silenced your intuition, you were following someone else's script. someone else's rules. But here's the one thing they could never erase. Once you've really listened, you can't unhear it. And once you've felt that frequency, even for a second, no amount of noise can completely shut it off again. There's a reason so many people walk through life with this quiet, unshakable heaviness, like they're dragging something invisible, a weight they can't name. It's not just stress. It's not just trauma. It's the ache of disconnection, a sense that something is missing, that something vital is just out of reach. And yet no one ever really talks about it. You feel it in the quiet moments, the in-between spaces, the late-night stare at the ceiling where your soul whispers, "There's more than this." And it's right. There is more. You didn't come into this life empty. You came encoded with patterns, with wisdom, with memories your soul chose long before you took your first breath in this timeline. But that wisdom, it got buried under expectations, under obligations, under the constant push to become what the world demanded of you. And now you've been moving forward carrying stories that aren't yours, cycles that didn't start with you, pain that predates you but somehow lives inside you. This is where the Akashic Records come in, and this is what they show over and over again. Healing isn't about fixing what's broken. It's about remembering what's been forgotten. The questions you keep circling: why do I keep attracting the same types of people? Why can't I feel fulfilled? Why does fear show up before anything even happens? Those answers aren't out there in a book or a course. They're written in the field, your soul's unique energetic imprint stored across lifetimes, waiting for you to slow down long enough to ask the right question. And when you do, it doesn't feel like learning. It feels like remembering, like someone turned on a light in a room you didn't even realize you were standing in. You remember your past selves, the ones who endured, loved, fought, fell, rose again. And suddenly your current struggles don't feel random anymore. They feel meaningful, like part of something bigger you chose to work through. That shift changes everything. You stop seeing your wounds as flaws. You start seeing them as keys, clues, markers of the work your soul came here to do. Healing doesn't begin because you downloaded a new strategy. It begins when you finally get quiet enough to hear what your life's been trying to tell you all along. The Akashic field doesn't flatter your ego. It doesn't coddle you. It reflects you back to yourself with honesty so sharp it can be disarming. Sometimes it shows you the exact moment you gave your power away. Sometimes it reveals the lifetime when a repeating pattern started. Sometimes it calls you out with a kind of clarity that leaves no place to hide. But it doesn't do it to punish you. It does it because you're ready. And the truth is, you've always been ready. You just forgot how to ask. There's no ritual required. No permission needed. You are the access point. The password has always been your willingness to listen. And when you approach the field not with entitlement, but with presence, it opens. Not because it was locked, but because you were. Healing begins with honesty, and there's nothing more honest than the stillness where you remember who you've always been. From the moment you were born, your potential was undeniable. The systems around you saw it even if you didn't. They saw your sensitivity, your strange dreams, your quiet intuition, and they knew. They knew you carried something they couldn't control. So they did what every system of control does when it encounters true power. They buried it, not by force but by repetition, not with violence but with distraction. They taught you to doubt your own voice, to chase approval instead of truth. They flooded your mind with noise so you'd never hear your inner guidance clearly. They built a world that rewards disconnection and ridicules inner knowing. And it worked for a while. You traded your instincts for logic, your creativity for productivity, your soul for a resume. You didn't even notice it happening. You thought it was maturity, that you were becoming realistic. But you weren't becoming wise, you were becoming predictable. And predictable people don't question systems, they feed them. But the records don't care about what the world taught you. They know who you were before all that. They remember your original frequency, wild, intuitive, unbound. They remind you that you didn't come here to play small. You didn't incarnate to live inside a box made by people who profit off your limitation. You came here with codes, with gifts, with a frequency powerful enough to break cycles and rewrite entire timelines. And that's why you were targeted, not personally, systemically. Because when enough people remember who they truly are, They become impossible to control. Not because they're violent or rebellious, but because they're sovereign. They stop waiting for permission. They stop trading truth for comfort. They stop outsourcing their power. That's what the Akashic Records do. They don't give you something new. They strip away what's false so what's real can finally breathe. And when that happens, you're no longer a victim of your story. You're the author. And that moment, the moment you reclaim authorship, it changes everything. Because now you're not just awake, you're activated. And the system fears that. Because someone with clarity is someone who won't be manipulated. Someone who listens to their own soul won't follow a path just because it's popular. And the best part, when you realign with your records, you don't have to yell. You don't have to prove anything. You just are. And when you speak from that place, illusion crumbles. You've been told to seek answers in books and gurus and methods. But the key to the records was never outside. It's been within you the whole time. The records aren't locked. They're vibrating all around and within you. The real work isn't getting access. It's remembering how to tune in. And real listening isn't about your ears, it's about presence. The Akashic field doesn't speak in sentences, it speaks in resonance. So it doesn't matter if you're using music, silence, breath, or dance, what matters is the state you're in. You don't need sacred robes or a mountaintop. You need space. Space in your mind. Space between your thoughts. Space to breathe without agenda. That's where it happens. That's where the field speaks. When you step into that space, not looking for a performance, but open to a feeling you begin to receive. Sometimes it's words, sometimes it's images, sometimes it's just peace so deep it reorders your entire nervous system. The records give you what you're ready for. No more, no less. And sometimes just being in that frequency is enough. Enough to remind you that you've always been more than what you were told. So remember the doubt, it's normal. The ego will try to stop you. It'll say you're imagining things, that nothing's happening. But that's how you know you're close. The ego screams loudest when the soul is about to speak. Push past the noise, sit with the stillness. Let it rise. You might not get clarity on the first try, or maybe you will, but the more you return to the stillness, the clearer it gets. You'll begin to feel the difference between thought and truth, between distraction and resonance. And when something ancient drops into your chest, something that bypasses the brain and just lands, you'll know you've arrived. The Akashic Records don't hide. They wait. For you to remember that real listening isn't about effort. It's about surrender. And the more you surrender, the louder the truth becomes.